Howdy, and welcome to my humble YouTube channel. I confess I haven't been prolific. Forgive me, it's been a while since my last confession. Such is the horror of gainful employment. Sometimes you have to dig in. I'll try to be more regular with my YouTube efforts in the future. By the way, if this sort of thing is of interest, please click the like and subscribe buttons. I'll do my best to post more regularly. Your comments are, of course, completely welcome. I request your courtesy, but feel free to disagree if you think I'm off plumb. In fact, please tell me anything I get wrong. It's not like I don't already know I'm not an expert. Corrections are most welcome. And now, our feature presentation, A Little Lead in Your Zeppelin, a brief presentation of the relationship of things that either float or sink and their weight. After that, some thoughts on thinking. We open with comments from a fellow I don't want to pick on, but gee willikers, Mr. Wilson, he just keeps coming up with corkers. Here's the YouTuber known as Sleeping Warrior on the mysteries of helium.
If you drop an object, do you agree it accelerates downwards?
No, a helium balloon accelerates up.
I think what he is trying to say is that gravity doesn't influence things that float. I don't understand that reasoning, and more on that in a minute or two. Let's run a quick test. This is an egg. Actually, this is an old tired joke. Truth to tell, times are rough. I needed to order a higher capacity scale to complete the follow-up to this video, and I had to sell the family chicken on eBay to get enough scratch to afford the purchase. The scale is on the way, but I fear tomorrow morning. My dear wife is going to wake up wanting to make omelets, and all we have left are fake eggs. I'm going to get fried. But let's persevere while the living is easy. There is a popular misconception in the flat earth community that relative density is what causes weight, and the floating helium balloon represents negative weight. Here's what this golf ball weighs, 45 grams. I always feel a little queasy when I say that because weight is force and grams aren't units of force, but it's what the scale reads. For completeness, it should be said this golf ball is submerged in a medium of air and is subject to a little bit of buoyancy. On Earth, in our gravity field, the buoyant force of air is about 11.8 Newton per cubic meter of air displaced. That's enough to lift a party balloon, but not enough to lift a golf ball. Here's a medium of water in which the golf ball sinks. Adding the golf ball to the water shows the golf ball adds its weight in entirety to the medium in which it resides. Here's a medium of salt water. The golf ball floats, and it still adds the entirety of its weight to the medium in which it's found. When something floats, anything, whether it's a golf ball in saline or a helium balloon in air, it retains all of its weight. All of it. Helium balloons have no special relationship with gravity. They have weight. If you want to use a less meaningless term than relative density, call it relative weight. Better yet, use the correct terminology. The effect is called buoyancy. The motions observed, both floating and sinking, are gravity in action. When you see a balloon float, rest assured a like volume of air has exchanged it downward. The driving force behind floating balloons is gravity acting on the surrounding air with greater force than on the balloon. That's a rejected hypothesis in the flat earth community, but dang, the reasoning they rely on just beats all.
Saying that things will drop through higher densities until they find the density they're at.
They seek their own equilibrium. Whatever their density is, they seek their own. I know they're not sentient. They don't have a conscience. They don't have a mind, but they do have a relative density to the medium that they're in. And we can demonstrate that if you displace something that's in equilibrium, for some magical reason, it always finds its equilibrium again if it's free to move. So whichever way you pull or push it out of its equilibrium point, it'll return back to that point, provided it's not physically stopped from doing so.
Note that while gravity can't be considered because current explanations are probably not complete, a magic force moving density to density is okay. Note also the cockeyed similarity between density attracting density and mass attracting mass. It's almost like flat earthers are on the right path. Who knows, in coming centuries they may catch up with Newton. Of course, By that time, they would be heckling the quantum gravity we've discovered in the meantime and saying the Walmart on Europa is fake, even if it does have the best prices on Ganymedian gemstones to be found anywhere in the solar system. The real density to explore pervades the flat Earth community as inexorable as gravity embracing the material universe. Epistemology is a study of knowledge and learning and its basis, the thought systems for resolving the difference between myth and fact. This past week, I found something that might be an analogy for what a flat earther perceives as research. In the parlor game Dixit, players describe simple illustrations on a card. Other players then attempt to pick the card out of a lineup. I'm glossing over details. I've never played the game. I have, however, seen Dixit cards used as creating writing prompts. A writer can pick a card at random, give the muse a kick in the rear, and write a story. Or browse the cards for something that strikes the fancy and let the ink flow from there. Flat earthers treat the world as a writing prompt, if I may be excused a generalization. I understand that we're all individuals, except for that one guy in the back of the crowd in the movie The Life of Brian. The flat earth method of inquiry is to make an observation. Better yet, just imagine one. Spin a yarn of some kind to explain what's seen with a story consistent with past fantasies and declare truth. Now, the secret of the story in the Dixit card is that the story never was in the card, it was in your subconscious. Or the story was the work product of a mental nudge based on your pre-established patterns of thought. That is the flaw in flat earth epistemology. The answers they find are from flights of imagination without consistent confirmation in the real world. One special case, whether it's refraction working on water behind oil rigs or party balloons lofting skyward, can become universal canon in flat earth physics. Take gravity. I can't figure out the math behind relativity in space-time geometry. I suspect it's not possible to find flat earthers who can do much better. To me, that defines a personal limit. To a flat earther, that means gravity doesn't exist. But you can't deny that stuff falls down. Like primitive peoples telling tales to explain lightning, thunder, or volcanoes, flat earthers spin tales of things like relative density to explain what they see. In the case of something too hard to understand, wishful thinking to the rescue. I think there is a distressing segment of the flat earth community, particularly those who follow YouTubers Quantum Eraser, Nathan Oakley, or Sleeping Warrior, who don't grasp simple equations, and please don't tell me math is artificial or that math is fake. Take V equals AT. Note how the units make such wonderful sense. You can work algebra on numbers and variables. You can do the same thing with units. Throw out the values, simplify the units, and you end up with S over T on both sides of the equals sign. Let's say we have an initial speed of 20 meters per second. Distance is the integration of velocity and time, so 20 meters per second for 60 seconds looks like this. The shaded area is the integration of velocity over time. 20 times 60 is 1200, and if you counted up the squares, you'd find it's 1200. Note that the grid lines represent 5 units each. A delightful surprise started coiling up to strike when I realized that S equals VT is the same form as the equation to find how many squares are in the shaded area. It's a rectangle, so area equals base times height. A equals BH, S equals VT. Interesting similarity. Now let's add an acceleration of 0.5 meters per second squared. The formula we need is V naught T plus 1/2 AT squared. First, let's check units. Cool deal. The units of S equals V naught T plus 1/2 AT squared as units work out to S equals S. That's valid from a unit standpoint, and it's the units of distance we're looking for. But when we want to work with real values, there's something wacky here. And this is what I realized a few moments ago with great glee. Consider 1/2 AT squared. What's that 1/2 all about? AT squared works out to units of meters. Seems good enough, but there's more. Back in school, I was told that AT gave terminal velocity. To determine distance traveled under acceleration, we needed average velocity times time, not terminal velocity times time. Okay. 1/2 AT is the midpoint between 0 and terminal velocity. 1/2 AT squared peels the distance out of average velocity and time. Average velocity works, but there's something far, far cooler going on here, and I just realized it. First, let's work out the distance covered the traditional, unquestioning way. (2,100 meters. Cool. The rectangle ABCD is the V0T portion of our equation. Base times height, or velocity times time, tells us how big that area is. That's the integral of velocity over time, which is distance traveled. The triangle BCE is a result of accelerating from 20 meters per second at a half meter per second squared. The formula for a triangle is 1/2 base times height, and that is where the 1/2 really comes from in the equation for distance as a product of acceleration and time, 1/2 AT squared. Do not let my beagle eyes and droopy jowls deceive you. I am ecstatic. You see, I didn't know the integral of a constant acceleration mandated the factor of 1/2 in the expression 1/2 AT squared until a few minutes ago. Absolutely and literally as I was writing the script. 1/2 is from the formula for the area of a triangle, because what you're really doing is calculating an integral of velocity over time, where velocity is changing on a constant basis. It all lines up. It's consistent. I've seen something every high school freshman already knows, but there's always joy in discovery. And the parlor game Dixit, with flights of fancy that may parallel flat Earth research, the name comes from the Latin phrase ipse dixit, which means he said it himself. Ipse dixit is an assertion without proof. Could that bear kinship to flat Earth research? The most precious aspect of this, for me, is something like an observation Ben Franklin once made. That beer is proof there is a God and he loves us. In our wonderful spherical world, the real one, physics is proof math is real, and math loves us. Thank you for visiting and for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe if this kind of storytelling is to your interest, and I'll try to post more frequently. Your comments will be most welcome and corrections cherished. For any of the Flat Earth who wish to post correction, please remember to give the basis for my error. All valid corrections will be met with cheer and gratitude. Corrections that may not themselves be correct will still be wonderful fodder for conversation and an opportunity for everyone to learn.